Hezbollah's leader confirms the group's involvement in the war in Syria, angering the Syrian opposition. But just how important is Hezbollah's involvement, and what are the implications for an already volatile region? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to Inside Story. I'm Stephen Cole. Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, has promised not to let the Syrian government fall. He said Syria has real friends. The opposition has long accused Hezbollah of supplying fighters in support of President Assad's army. In a televised speech, Nasrallah said Syria's opposition is too weak to bring down Assad. His broadcast followed 2 bomb attacks in the heart of the capital, Damascus. Well, the leader of the Lebanese movement, Hezbollah, says the Syrian president's government won't fall. Hassan Nasrallah was speaking in Lebanon just hours after an explosion killed 14 people in Syria's capital, Damascus.
Syria has real friends in the region, and the world will not allow Syria to fall into the hands of America, Israel, or Salafist groups.
The Syrian National Coalition has reacted to what it called threats by Hezbollah's leader. A statement released by the opposition said the Syrians and the Lebanese hoped that the Hezbollah leadership would stop their attacks on Homs and Damascus and take into account the gravity of the situation in the region. But they heard nothing but threats and warnings against setting the region on fire and an admission of their interference in Syrian affairs. Well, US President Barack Obama said the facts need to be established before the United States will consider reacting to allegations of chemical weapons being used in Syria. Obama warned that the circumstances of their use are not yet clear, and he won't be rushed into ordering military action.
What we now have is evidence that chemical weapons have been used inside of Syria, but we don't know how they were used, when they were used, who used them. We don't have a chain of custody that establishes what exactly happened. And when I am making decisions about America's national security and the potential for taking additional action in response to chemical weapon use, I've got to make sure I've got the facts.
So let's introduce our guests. In Beirut, Kamel Waznee, a political analyst who is the founder and director of the Center for American Strategic Studies in Beirut. Joining us in Doha, Louay Safee, a member of the political office of the Syrian National Coalition. And in Tunis, Nicholas Noe, founder of MideastWire.com. Welcome to you all, gentlemen. And I want to begin with Kamel Waznee and ask you straight away, why is Hezbollah, through Nasrallah anyway, now openly declaring its support for President Assad, or at least tacitly anyway, saying Syria has friends?
Well, obviously, this is not the first time that Hezbollah supported Syria. It was the opposite. Syria supported Hezbollah since the beginning of the war with Israel. Since 1982, the Syrians sided with Hezbollah, supported Hezbollah, provided them with logistic and weapon, and provided them with political coverage. I think it's a strategic interest for Hezbollah to continue to side with the Syria, and I think Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was very clearly, explicitly stating that fact yesterday, and he said we will stand with Syria to the end, and nobody can bring the Syria or the Sham or Damascus down. I think this is a commitment. It has a different. It has many aspects of it. Strategic regional power. Actually, they stand by each other, and this alliance extend itself to Syria, to Iran, to the whole what they call the resistance front against Israel. So I think that's the stance that Hezbollah, I think, took by the voice of Hassan Nasrallah, and I think this will be the case.
Okay, well, let's go for some analysis straight away. Nicholas Noe, there are, as you know, many descriptions of Hezbollah. President Obama has called it a terrorist force, for example. Others may see it as a political movement. Some, it's a charity. How would you describe Hezbollah?
Well, let me just correct one thing that your guest said, actually. We're going to go back in history. Actually, Hezbollah fought the Syrian regime and the regime of Hafez Assad, the deceased father of the current president of Syria, Bashar Assad. So there's a much more complicated relationship, historical relationship, if we're going to go there, between Hezbollah and the Syrian regime. And it's actually something very interesting to consider in the current phase, because you do not see manifestly on the ground Hezbollah massively committing itself full throttle to protect the regime. They are increasingly doing so, and they have been protecting the regime for quite some time, both on the political level and on the ground, as I think all of us acknowledge, and as Nasrallah has acknowledged for some time as well. I think that, you know, the way that the U.S., for example, which you just brought up, views Hezbollah, you know, as a terrorist organization. This complicates the situation of diplomacy, which is actually what Nasrallah spoke about yesterday, and which a number of different actors in the region have been talking about for some time. The need to get a political solution together. There are many reasons why. Many people argue that part of the reason why we can't find a political solution is because groups like Hezbollah, non-Syrian groups, are aiding the regime. But there's also the counter-argument that groups, you know, supported by different states in the region, such as Saudi Arabia and Qatar, are also fueling the violence as well. So the issue is one of how are we going to get a political dialogue? Okay. And if you label people terrorists or these other things, it becomes very difficult to do that.
It's certainly never helpful, is it? Nicholas Noe. Well, let's move on to Louay Safee. You heard from Nicholas there that Hezbollah has been in Syria some time. How long do you estimate that Hezbollah has been fighting in Syria, and why do you think they're there?
Well, they have been in Syria for at least 8 months. They have been traced in Daraa area, in Daraa province, as well as in Homs and Hama. So they have been fighting, but now yesterday we started to see clearly what's going on. There is a strategic decision, I guess, or I think it's by Tehran to stand behind the Assad regime at any cost, even at the cost of dragging Lebanon into this fight. And now Hezbollah is doing the bidding of the Iranians.
All right, well, I'm going to come to Kamel in a moment for more on this, but just to describe the party, the organisation, it literally means the party of God and is the most powerful political and military organisation, certainly in Lebanon. It's made up mostly of Shia Muslims. Hezbollah was founded with Iranian financial support. It maintains those links with Iran today. The group has been characterised by its hostility towards Israel. The two sides fought a month-long war in 2006, after which Hezbollah claimed victory. Hezbollah also provides social services and healthcare, which gives it a wide popular appeal. Well, since the start of the crisis in Syria, Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah has sided unequivocally with the Syrian government. Commentators say that move has squandered some of the goodwill that Hezbollah has on the Arab street. I wonder, Kamel, has Hezbollah squandered some of the goodwill it has on the Arab street?
Well, obviously, there's a divided Arab street today. There's people who still respect Hezbollah, and there's people who actually turn against Hezbollah among their friend alliance. But the issue for Hezbollah is not what other people think of them, is what they think of the current situation. They feel that this is a righteous cause. They fight for the Middle East, because Syria is a cornerstone for the resistance in the Middle East, and a failure of Syria will change the map of the Middle East, and they're gonna come next in the fight against them. I think at this point, I think the Hezbollah came to the aid of the Lebanese who sit in the borders, but eventually they will prevent the collapse of the regime of Bashar al-Assad. I think the Iranians stated very clearly they're supporting the regime of Bashar al-Assad, and they wanted a political process that bring all the Syrians together.
Nicholas,
that means even Hezbollah is there, they're not going to fight the Syrian war on behalf of the Syrian. This is a Syrian war that is aided by international country.
Well, we're going to get on, Kamel, we'll get on to that, whether or not this is in fact a proxy war or not. But Nicholas has rightly identified the fact that being dubbed a terrorist force isn't particularly helpful. But also, some say that Hezbollah is only in Syria to see an international expansion of the Shia religion. How would you address that, Nicholas? And I'll ask Kamel that as well, but Nicholas first.
I mean, that's a very explosive issue. Hezbollah has long regarded its, let's say, its most vulnerable point as the fact that it is a Shiite organization. Although it's in a political alliance with the most popular Christian party in the Middle East, the Free Patriotic Movement in Lebanon, and indeed governed Lebanon for quite some time with that group, as well as others, it is very frightened by the sectarian aspect, because this is one that, of course, cuts right across the heart of the Middle East. We're seeing this in Iraq for 10 years more. It's escalating in the current situation. Right across the Middle East, this is one of the main vulnerabilities of Hezbollah. It has tried, at least at a public level, to try and portray itself as not a sectarian, not a Shiite kind of enemy, for example, of the Sunnis, of course. That is something that I think it's a battle that it's losing. And it's losing as it increasingly gets more involved on the ground in the fighting in both Syria and perhaps as well in Lebanon in the coming period. It's a deadly weapon against Hezbollah. Its critics, and we have to be very clear, there are a range of critics of Hezbollah. Some of them I would characterize as very disinterested, neutral observers who are extremely upset, morally outraged by what Hezbollah, the stance of Hezbollah on Syria. But there are also enemies on the battlefield, all around it, and it depends on which side you view as the good guys or the bad guys, but that have an interest in stoking the flames of sectarian unrest and sectarian anger. And certainly there are some of Hezbollah's worst enemies, Israel, and also some of the great Sunni monarchies in the region, including Qatar and Saudi Arabia, which are pushing this angle.
We keep coming back to this proxy war, don't we? Kamel, I want you to bring you in on this and this thought.
Well, actually, I don't think it's a sectarian issue, because a lot of element of supporter of Bashar al-Assad are Sunni, and I think without the Sunni support, he probably would not be there. It's not a sectarian issue what is taking place in Syria. Some people like to characterize it as sectarian. It's not like the Hezbollah wanted to make the rest of the Middle East Shia. That's not their agenda. But some people always use the sectarian issue as a way to divide the region. I think this is remapping the region. It's a proxy war. I said it in Qatar 2 years ago when I said this is a proxy war, and I think the Syrians are paying the heavy price for it, economically, politically, safety-wise, because look at what happened to Syria and to the Syrian people. They live in a very bad economic condition with no securities. I think the region need to look carefully at what is taking place in Syria, because what is taking place in Syria has a lot of ramifications for Lebanon, for Iraq, for Saudi Arabia, for Qatar. No one will be left alone if the situation actually go to a point where we can see more of a bloodshed and a topple of the regime.
Huge regional implications. Louay Safee, what, in your view, is Hezbollah's interest in this Syrian conflict, and why has it been there since it began?
Well, the current conflict has shown Hezbollah for what it is. It's an agent of the Iranian government. It fought with Israel on behalf of the Iranians. Now it's turning its weapons toward the Syrian people. And it's interesting to hear your guest from Lebanon talking about a righteous fight. How that fight is righteous when you stand behind a tyrant who is bombarding cities and torturing children and killing civilians.
No. Kamel, I want you to wait. I want you to wait for just a second, please, while Louay finishes his point.
So clearly, Hezbollah is interested in advancing the Iranian agenda, and it's fighting with the dictator, the one who has refused the most reasonable demand for reform in Syria. And it's clearly now has shown itself to be a sectarian party. It can't claim to be an Arab or a national party interested to defend the people. this party is interested to advance the agenda of the Iranians.
All right.
And that's clear.
Okay, Kamel, your reply to that.
Well, obviously, we have to look at the situation in Syria. Is this Jabhat al-Nusra terrorist organization listed on the U.S. terrorist organization? Is that the front that the Syrians want to put out? Is that explosion that taken place in Syria? Is that what the Syrian Free Army want to put out? Every day they attacking innocent people. They cut heads. They cut hands. They rape women. Is this really what the Free Syrian Army wanted us to convince us? Is that what liberation mean and democracy mean and due process mean? Look what they did to the Lebanese on the borders. They located in the border between Lebanon and Syria. They came and attacked those innocent people, destroyed this home, and I think Hezbollah came to defend those innocent people and said Hassan Nasrallah.
Okay, a lot of allegations
clearly,
there. I want to give Louay the chance to come back to that. Louay, you come in, and then I'm going to go. Then I'm going to go to Nicholas.
Thank you. I mean, this is the business of the defenders of the regime, always trying to focus on the rogue elements within the opposition. The opposition has condemned all those car bombs that we believe that the regime is behind them. We have really, Jabhat al-Nusra is not part of the FSA. It's not part of the Free Syrian Army, and so this is a complete distortion of the truth. Now, let us ask who created this chaos in Syria that allowed certain rogue elements to come in. In fact, some of the rogue elements were created by the regime itself to create terror within the country, terrorize the country. And who is terrorizing the population? Who is throwing the chemical weapons on the people?
Louay, I want to focus back on Hezbollah more than these sort of wider allegations. And go to Nicholas. Nicholas, we've heard, because this idea of a proxy war has come up a few times. We've heard a few times, even in this short conversation, about the history of Hezbollah, the long arm of Iran behind Hezbollah. Is that right? Are they there as a proxy army, a proxy force?
The problem is, and I'm sorry if this sounds like a cliche throwaway phrase, is we can't view these things in these black and white terms. If you view Hezbollah as a purely Iranian agent, then the political solution, which I'm going to argue is absolutely necessary at this critical moment, and indeed that's what Nasrallah said last night, then the political solution is completely off the table. If you think that Hezbollah is only a terrorist organization and only an Iranian agent, then we're not going to be able to find a political solution if you come to the table with that approach. Okay? Yes, Hezbollah was started by Iran. It has deep links to Iran. The Central Intelligence Agency of America, I think, has actually characterized it quite fairly as it's a partnership relationship between a junior and a senior partner. There's a spiritual relationship. Indeed, the spiritual leader of Iran is regarded by Hezbollah as the leader of Hezbollah on matters of blood and war. There's a great degree of variation and nuance in that. But if we look at it purely in these black and white terms, we're not going to find a political solution. Which leads me to the last point, which is...
Does Hezbollah see Syria as perhaps a natural expansion of its activities in Lebanon, a sort of spillover?
No, in the sense that Hezbollah would like it very much if it did not have to devote its resources to the Syrian conflict, if it did not have to deal with the sectarian aspect which is starting to engulf it, if it did not have to divert resources from its main jihadist struggle, which is against Israel. So right now, Hezbollah is not in a position that it wants to be in. Indeed, it's not in a position that it thought it would be in 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago. And it is adapting. Where we're at right now is Nasrallah's warning last night, which is, everybody take note. This is the critical stage. This is the major turning point. If the other sides opposed to the Syrian regime go fuller in with greater violence, indeed Obama is even considering lethal aid now in light of the chemical weapons reports. If the violence begins to escalate, Hezbollah is going to come down firmly with its other allies or its senior partner, let's say Iran and others in the region, on the side of Bashar Assad and the regime. And we are going to have a major war in the Middle East. A major war that is going to involve jihadist groups on the Sunni side. It's going to involve a jihadist group and a political party like Hezbollah. It's likely going to draw in a whole range of actors with some of the most sophisticated weapons, some of the most dangerous weapons in the world. So his warning last night was, everybody has to take a moment and consider, because we are reaching a point of no return for the political solution.
Said, yeah, indeed.
He says,
Obama said that the facts aren't straight yet about chemical weapons. He said if they're used, it would be a potential game changer. But he didn't say exactly how the game would change. Kamel, is this all a proxy war in your view? The US and the West operating through Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia against the Free Syrian Army, backed by Iran and Russia and Hezbollah?
Well, I said it a long time ago, this is a proxy war and this is going to be devastating for Syria. I feel sorry for the Syrian people because they have to pay heavy prices. Now the destruction in Syria can cost hundreds of billions of dollars, and I'm sure there's not going to be enough money to rebuild Syria once things stop. But I think I agree with Nicholas from Tunis that I think this is a warning. Any intervention from the United States is going to change the scale of war, and I think a lot of people hoping that the United States will actually engage, because this is going to change the whole scale. And I think there's a lot of wise people on the American side. They will not intervene in this war. I think the General Dempsey, he has been very wise and he has very cautious about entering a war in Syria. And I think the Defense Minister Chuck Hagel, I think is a respectable man, that he's very cautious about entering any war on the side of anyone in Syria. I think there's other element in the Obama administration wanted this war, but I think if the American enter this war, this is gonna bring the whole Middle East and the region into a confrontation.
It certainly would.
That gonna bring the Israeli, the Iranian, and the Iraqi,
warfare,
and Qatar is not gonna be away from it, because I think a lot of people are building anger at Qatar. And all those people who are involved,
Louay,
they have to be very cautious.
Yeah,
because
Louay,
I
want to move on because we're
bloody.
running out of time. Louay, it seems to me, and I might be wrong, the US doesn't want a regime collapse. What it wants is some kind of controlled transition. Is that possible?
It is possible if the opposition receives strong support at this moment and the war would not drag on much longer. And I can tell you, particularly for our friend in Lebanon, that not only the Syrian people will feel the pain, the Lebanese will feel the pain, and that will be the fault of Hezbollah, because we all know how tense the situation is in Lebanon today. Now, I can tell you from now, really, Iran has come straight right behind the regime, and that's why it has pushed Hezbollah into an area it has no business, entering into. But I agree. If at this moment, before things get out of hand, if we can provide a strong support, meaningful support to the opposition, we don't need any outside forces. The Syrians can finish this regime. This is a.
That's all a bit too late, Nicholas, isn't it? The outside forces are already there. So how do you see this moving towards some kind of negotiated transition? I mean, we could end up with the FSA trying to negotiate with Hezbollah, could we, at the end?
It doesn't end. It doesn't end nicely. It doesn't end in a political track. If, as your guest just suggested, we fuel the opposition to Bashar Assad's regime and opposition to Hezbollah with more and better weapons. Nasrallah's point last night was that this is going to be, it's already become an existential struggle. The side of Hezbollah and Iran and Syria have tremendous capabilities and multiple ways by which they can bring great difficulties and great suffering on their opponents. And if they are pushed further and further towards that corner, they will react with further and further force. There is still a chance for a political solution. There has to be a political solution. Fueling this conflict with more and better weapons on any of the sides is only going to lead to a far greater conflict.
All right, Nicholas, thank you. Thank you indeed to all my guests today. In Beirut, Kamel Waznee; in Doha, Louay Safee; and in Tunis, Nicholas Noe. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Inside Story. If you want to send your feedback, please do so via email to insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks again for watching. From me, Stephen Cole. Goodbye for now.